Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. So, welcome once again to this live show where we interview amazing guests who are impacting their communities. So, today I'm going to host Danson Maloti, who's the program lead at Voices for Climate Action. And I'm your host, Dr. Violet Mbiti. So let me introduce to you Danson Maloti.
Good evening, everyone. And as introduced, my name is Dan Maloti. I lead programs on Voices for Just Climate Action and Ujamaa Kenya. But then within also a consortium of partners called the LRF VCA Consortium, which is a consortium of 3 partners who are supported by HIVOS to implement a 5-year program on echoing out or amplifying voices for just community action, which is under the VCA Kenya platform. And I lead program in 6 counties. That is Mombasa, Nairobi, Kajiado, there's Kakamega, Siaya, and Tana River County. And
Wow.
I'm honored to be part of this talk in this evening.
You're welcome, Danson. So,
Thank you.
why climate? Why did you decide that you'd also like to engage in matters climate?
I think if I would start by looking at climate as a dynamic issue, and what you call it's both parallel, and by saying that ni kwa sababu one we have seen that over the number of years there has been a lot of what you call natural catastrophes, and these ones vary from what you call evidenced flooding, erratic what you call heat waves, poor rainfall patterns, poor weather conditions. We have heard of wildfire. We have heard of massive environmental destruction, both by human beings and even natural calamities. And the biggest one has been hunger. And I think hunger and drought are one of the major things which are facing both our country and even within the region of Africa and globally. And I think if you bring it back home, even as we are transiting to new government, every day on our news, you will see people are dying of drought, and then there's what you call lack of rain, or even we have erratic weather patterns. Today, it's so dry. At some point, we have what you call erratic rainfalls which come within few minutes and then they are gone. So why climate is because the existence of these volatile climate conditions and the unpredictable weather patterns have what we call root causes, which might be both by human or natural, but the major driving factors is it is our past activities which have forced to this. But as citizens or as human beings, we might not be aware that what we did 10 years ago is what we are experiencing the manifestation. So that is why the Voices for Just Climate Action is a program which focuses on amplifying voices so that all human beings and even citizens of what you call VCA program areas are aware that they need to be either climate sensitive or climate responsive and do justice to climate so that we mitigate these things because we are already facing them. And then from there, now we look at how do we build a responsive community, institution, government, and even policies and governance structures which are able to respond to these climate issues and climate change.
All right. Even I heard you mention amplifying voices. So with regards
Yeah.
to that, who is your target group for this particular project?
I think the VCA, the Voices for Just Climate, looks at Kenya as a country which needs to expand and achieve what we call a responsible civic space, where we are looking at society voices, community voices, government voices, indigenous communities, and marginalized populations are well positioned to debate and accelerate on responding to climate change matters. So our primary key people are communities, especially the indigenous communities and the marginalized ones. And then the secondary for key target people are what we call duty bearers, who have obligation to respond or in terms they have a corresponding duty and responsibility to address on the climate change issues, both in terms of policy, in terms of governance, and then in terms of resources, and even in terms of structures, so that the issues of climate change are responded in a way that it is a collective responsibility. So we have different target population at different, I would say, stage of role and responsibility. But then targeted are primary indigenous communities and that geographical area.
So you've mentioned indigenous. So, there are some people who might not know what indigenous means. So what do you mean by indigenous communities?
Thank you, Violet. I think for me, I wouldn't want to use the word indigenous as per vocabulary, but then to bring it home, we would say indigenous are sort of uh, the original people or communities who are born and brought in a certain maybe constituency. For example, let's look at Turkana people. If we today we say we want to define a Turkana person, born and led in Turkana, who are these? Then we need to specify them specifically. The coastal people, who are these? The Nairobi people, who are these? And we are looking at people who have not just come to that community because of maybe professional duties and responsibilities, or maybe they have come there for search for greener pastures, or even they have come there maybe because of certain what you call socioeconomic reasons. But then the indigenous are people who have their roots in terms of gene comes from that area, and they are able to understand that the simple activities which have been happening ever since their clans started up to date have what you call a ripple effect on their either functioning in terms of future or even at present level. So at that point, we are saying for indigenous communities, let's say like the ones who belong to ASOL communities, the arid and semi-arid areas, there are people who maybe are pastoralists, and then they keep animals, they live in certain way of life, and they practice their day-to-day what we call indigenous community activities, which impact. And you'd find, I would still use Turkana as an example, where we have, there are people who keep cattle, they graze for pasture, they have certain, what we call population behavior, and their day-to-day life has an impact on the volatile climate conditions. So if even the unpredictable climate conditions. So why we are targeting individuals is because there are people who are born, brought up there, they will live, they will die there. they will not move to another, maybe I would say constituency or area. But then whether they go or they didn't, they would always stick to east or west. Home is best. Yeah, in
Okay,
the simple.
okay, so for instance, since you said that one of the areas you're working in is Kajiado.
Mm-hmm.
So is it the rural parts of Kajiado, or it's also the urban areas of Kajiado? So are
We are
you
looking at.
targeting both the urban areas as well as the rural areas? And then secondly, with regard now to the persons that you are working closely with, let's say like a pastoralist, what exactly do you want from them? Just bring it out clearly. Yes. So you may first start by whether you are targeting urban areas or rural areas, and then secondly, what exactly do you want from them, from that particular group? Thank you.
Thank you, Violet. I think in this at this level, I would say it is more based on the context of
Okay.
one. If you are looking at amplifying voices for indigenous, then the area might now have turned into they are both urban and rural population. But then we are looking at the present. I would say the current uh, what you call population mix, and then demographic. I would say geographical or demographic features. Like an area like Kajiado, of course, it is a rural area. But then if you move to the town, it becomes a peri-urban. A peri-urban,
Yes.
in a way, it maintains its historical rural aspect, but then it has been developed to suit certain urban, I would say, spheres or peripherals. So at that level, you realize kuna investors who have come and
Yes.
maybe they have tampered with the river to put up a mall. They have tampered with the river, maybe to build a road. They have even maybe brought down a forest just to maybe build what you call an exclusive the modern type of cities, just like they would say Tapu City, Kajiado City. And point, what happens is once they want to upgrade from a rural setup to an urban set, they usually undergo a lot of social activities and development, which at some point they do a lot of injustice for climate. So if at the point I'm saying target population is indigenous, we also keep in mind that the indigenous could be a rural setup, and at the same
Yeah.
time could be a peri-urban and an urban center, depending on the current uh, what we call dynamic which you are looking at. And at that point, I would say if you go to Kajiado, the major
Yeah.
town has turned into a peri-urban
Yes.
because of the development. But then if you go a bit, some maybe 20 kilometers in, you'll find the indigenous communities are still carrying on their normal rural sort of setup activities where they would graze, maybe put up their structures. When there's no pasture, they move to another area and they have already maybe ripped out of that area. And then maybe an investor who would look at that land as an empty land can come and decide, you know what, since there is no grass growing here, the hills are on the downfalls, and maybe the climatic conditions are not raining. For example, they would want to put something like let's say a modern market, and a modern market comes with a lot of inbuilt infrastructure in terms of maybe things which will tamper with the ecosystem. And one of them is like sewer system, water system, boreholes, all those. So at this level, I would say VSA respects the context of the areas. So we are looking at both rural and what you call peri-urban and urban setup. Yes.
All right. Even one of the things that is happening now, you find that climate change is one of the issues that has been prioritized even by development partners, even at the global level, because we can even experience even the effects of climate change here in Kenya, because it started being cold, I think, in early April, and it extended up to like August, and usually it's just between June and July. So we really do feel the effects of climate change. Now, like now the communities that you are targeting, have they started being responsive to this particular initiative?
I think
are there gatekeepers who are fighting it?
I think at this moment I would say much has not been done in terms of maybe to say like there is 100% response, but then at some point this is the wake up time, and the running call is let people be aware that in everything they do, they must do justice to climate, so that we are able to look at what you call the robust volatile climatic conditions in a deeper way. And at this moment, I'm saying we would say VCA has come knocking door at the indigenous communities and institutions and telling them, you know what, as much as you might not be aware of in terms of their effects and their manifestation, then our work is to bring into that knowledge of knowing that the activities I'm engaging right now have what you call a ripple effect on our climate. It could be immediately, or it could be intermediate, or even in future. So what we are saying is that the Voices for Just Climate is there to strengthen what you call knowledge, information, and capacity of communities to understand on climate change, because we are brought up to know that climate change is just whether there is rain or there is no rain. And then the same way we are brought up to know that the state always says issues of climate are issues of maybe the Department of Meteorological, which announces that this week we'll experience cold, rains, what. There has not been a lot of attention on what we call climate vulnerability in terms of our socioeconomic, our development activities, and even what we call the man-made or human practices. And a good example is if we look at the kind of heat patterns that we are having right now, they might not be an effect of yesterday's activity, but it is because we brought down trees 5 years ago, 10 years ago without replanting back. And since the effect or the issues of climate vulnerability are so dynamic and hard to understand, no one is ready to understand that it affected the ozone layer, it affected the rainfall patterns. If we don't have forests, then we are not able to maybe predict the weather patterns in terms of cold seasons, dry seasons, humid seasons. So I would say what we want to do is strengthen voices for communities to understand on the knowledge and information, and then two is also to call on attention for governments both at national and county level to be obliged in terms of responding to climate change obligations. And obligations, I'm looking at government as a duty bearer who plays a leadership role. And you know, a leadership role is envisaged on governance. So if an act is there to say if you are going to live in a certain area, which is always known to be a rain, maybe I would say a heavy rain area, then if you want to develop it into an urban or a peri-urban center, there are certain things which you need or you must do for you not to affect the climate in terms of present, the future, and even in future generations to come.
Wow, wow, wow. So even when you're saying matters, even climate justice, even when also stating that you also engage with policy makers, I'd also like to know whether you also engage in budget advocacy with regard to like allocation of resources towards alleviating climate change. Because if you look even at the government budget, more so like allocation towards environment, you find that that particular department is usually among the ministries which are given the lowest allocation. So I wanted to know whether this particular project also capacity builds the communities on budget advocacy with regard to matters climate.
Thank you, Violet. I think in that aspect, quickly maybe give you a synopsis, just a quick synopsis on the theory of change for VCA. And
yes.
I said Kenya is one of the countries which committed back from 2016, not even 2016, back in 2015.
Yes.
And in 2016, Kenya ratified what we call the Climate Act change, the Climate Change Act of 2016. But then we have had it revised. So there is a new one which is pending and is yet to be ratified. But then our theory of change for VCA looks at a 5-year impact where we would have achieved what we call expanded civic space, both to amplify voices for community, civil society, indigenous communities, marginalized groups, and populations, so that they're able to respond to what we call climate change matters in a very just way. In a just way, I'm saying in a justice way, in a way that in everything that we do, we must do justice to climate, just like the way you do justice to a human being. So at that level, I would want to put your question into the perspective of our theory. And at this level, I would say we are focusing on maybe 3 outcome areas for now. And one of them is a pillar on building what we call mutual capacity to strengthen what we call local-based solutions that are scaled towards alternative climate solutions, where we are saying if there is a local way we can do justice to climate, let's inform the communities that what you are doing is ABCD will have this and this, and then we strengthen it so that we are able to mitigate and respond. And then pillar 2 looks at agenting and movement building, amplified stories, and even ecological justice. That level, why am I saying that is because we have had cases in court where certain communities petitioned the government not to maybe invade areas like riparian areas, you understand, areas like the marine ecosystem, areas like the river banks, areas like the forests, areas like the waterfall areas, areas like what we call seasonal rivers. So that's also another area where we are saying let us set an agenda and build movement toward doing action on climate change. And then the third pillar is to look at building what we call joint lobby and advocacy to influence policy, finance, and legislation on what we call responsive, locally shaped climate solutions. And at that level, we are saying maybe level A can come immediately, and then we go to B, and then we go to C. But there are areas where if we have existing policies and legislation on financing, then our work is to look at how do we amplify voices so they're able to push or even increase the allocation through local funding. I would give an example of an area like Kakamega. Kakamega and I would say Vihiga are some of the counties which have been termed as champion, including I don't, is it Kitui? Should be Kitui.
Yeah.
Including maybe Kitui and other parties which had domesticated the Climate Change Act, and they would even have departments of climate change within the Ministry of Environment, within the Ministry of Agriculture, within the Ministry of, I would say, Ministry of maybe some people call it environment and issues of garbage. You understand? Yes, environment and issues of garbage collection, issues of maybe infrastructure and planning. So we'd have a department there on climate change, and we even have some counties which have directors of climate change, and even have allocated finance through the structure on climate change coordination committees at the county assembly, and even which goes down up to the ward level at some county and even ward level. So at that point, we have areas where they have what we call CFAs, community forest associations, an area like Naivasha, Molo, where they have forests. And within that area, they usually allocate money or funds for climate. So at that level, we would say, let us research, because most of our agendas are informed by research. If there is financing, then how much has it been, and is it responsive, and is the financing going to directly implementing issues of climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and even maybe lobby for what we call climate resilience, in terms of to look at areas where we have unerratic climate conditions. Then we are able to develop resilience when it comes to adaptation and even human behavior. And we would say, for you to do ABCD, then please do this. So we are there to push for funding and policy legislation, but then it narrows down to what we call county dynamics. Where there are no voices, let's build voices and then push for now policy, legislation, and financing. And where there are existing policies and laws regulating issues of climate change, then let's push for allocation through local funding. So at this point, I would say, yes, there is a component on pushing for increased budget allocation, but then not so much community are aware about it. And recently we had a debate. Some know it is 2%, others know it is 6%. Understand? But of what? Of it? Is it of the entire ministry budget or the entire county budget? Those are some of the questions which need to be debated and put into perspective, so that communities are able to understand and follow up on accountability and push where there is no funding, and where there is funding, push for appropriate use and accountability.
All right.
Yes.
So now that now we are coming to the end of the show, I'd like you to to share your sentiments, urging the community, like the ones who are watching online, on what action they should take with regards to matters conserving their environment and also matters climate change, because we know that preserving our climate is a responsibility of every citizenry, of every individual. So I'd like you to address the individuals who are watching this particular show on why it is important for them to prioritize matters climate. And thereafter, you can even speak even to a policymaker who might be watching this show. Let's say like someone from the executive or even at the national level. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Violet. I think one, I need to put people to be aware that Kenya as a country has commitments within its Vision 20 agenda, which sets a target of, a simple example is increasing 10% forest cover. And if you look at our real time, is that we are saying by 2030 would have planted maybe 7 billion trees. And while we are doing that, then we are responding to what we call the National Climate Change Strategy, which drives actions with an enactment of the Climate Change Act of Kenya, which is 2026. And that places some obligation and commitments, both in terms of funding and then in terms of even bringing what we call stakeholders and partners to talk and debate on climate issues, so that they are able to, one, strengthen and develop capacity in terms of learning on a human rights-based approach to climate change. So my running call to communities is that, one, let us all keep debating on why the climate is behaving this way right now, and then let us reflect back on what are some of the root causes that have done or have brought this effect of climate change, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and then now look at what are we currently doing, and does it have any effect negatively on climate impact in terms of present, the intermediate future, and then in future. And at that level, I would urge for what you call increased stakeholders engagement, both communities, institutions, civil society, government, and even development partners to discuss on climate matters. It could be in either way. Where there is no civic space, then let's expand the civic space. Where there is civic space, let's amplify the voices. That is one. The other thing is to look at how do we co-create what we call innovative solutions that respond to a just climate. And at this moment, I would say innovative solutions where there is an ambiguous climate change effect. Then how are we going to adapt to that? And how are we going to build what we call resilience communities so that they are able to respond to the erratic climate change issues in a very, I would say, climate responsive way, that it will mitigate the effects, but it will build to what we call conservation, adaptation, and resilience, and even preserving our climate. And then the last one is to also call citizens to keep on voicing and amplifying what you call local local voices or community-led voices in forefronting the experiences they have had about climate change. And at that level, we want to look at a multi-stakeholder approach where we are saying every citizen has a corresponding duty and responsibility to discuss, push, and lobby for climate change agenda and matters at either passing on information, knowledge building, movement building, financing, adaptation, resilience, and even responding to climate change in a just climate responsive way. So that will be my running call. And we are looking at even political. Political, we are saying, let us have what we call national and county leadership who have obligation over their political agendas in terms of manifestos, in terms of strategy. For example, if we have an area MCA, let their strategy about development respond to a just climate action strategy. The same way to area MP, let us interrogate their manifestos where they have not prioritized on climate change and issues of environment. Then we put them into an obligation and accountable to that. At the national agenda, let us interrogate what are some of the existing climate change programs, intervention, financial allocations, uh, under our local devolved funds, so that we are able to support communities on issues of climate mitigation, resilience, adaptation, and even conserving on climate. And at that level, including planting trees and looking at, in my day-to-day activity, if I wake up in the morning and I want to use, maybe I would say, firewood to cook at my house, how does it impact on the climate? If I wake up in the morning and we have to drive three of us in the same family using different cars, how does it impact our climate? If we wake up in the morning and throw our rubbish, which we have used the previous night, along the road, or even dispose plastic in within just randomly, how will it impact? And at that level, we will be putting ourselves into what we call accountable obligation and corresponding roles and responsibility in doing justice to climate.
All right.
And a simple way is to look at how do we practice it from the basic unit of a responsive citizen at the family level, at the community level, at the legislation level, at the leadership level, now at the national, and then regional, and then we move up to the global. And that is how we are going to do it. So where there is an opportunity, bring it on its own. Where there is no opportunity, integrate it into existing structures and opportunities. And then where you feel there's a gap, then try to mitigate between building what we call either capacity or opening up opportunities to interlink and integrate, so that we are able to have a collective responsive way in responding to climate change.
All right. Thank you, Dan Maloti, for the insightful discussion. And viewer, thank you for watching the show. I hope you've learned a thing or two from this discussion. And let's embrace let's embrace preserving our environment, because at the end of the day, what we do now affects our future. So thank you so much for joining us on this platform, Dan Maloti, and thank you our viewer for watching this particular show. Asante na Mungu awabariki. Asante.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Violet. And I look forward to more maybe platforms where we can discuss. But then for now, I would call for people to just look at the hashtag on VCA, issues of climate justice, and then you can also join the discussions at different platforms within our communities, both virtual and both physical.
All right. Thanks so much, Danson. All right.
Thank you and good evening.
All right.